And hello there, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to a second one of these space related videos. Now this time around I have actually tried to move the microphone away from my face, because the last thing you need to hear is any of my kind of ASMR chewing. As a note, don't do that with your microphones, it's generally a bad idea. But today we are moving on to what I know, and you may or may not know, as the Prevalence class cruiser. Now again, this is another ship from my XCOM, XCOM 2 and Mass Effect timeline crossover fanfiction, and in comparison to the previous ship, which was the Predominance class, the Prevalence class is almost twice the length. It is far larger than any traditional council race vessel. This thing outscales most dreadnoughts, with the exception of either Turian super dreadnoughts or the Asari Destiny Ascension. Now, in terms of what this ship is and what it's capable of, it is actually just a cruiser. It's not even a true battleship, it's not even a true carrier, it's not even a true battle cruiser, let alone a dreadnought. This thing is basically a step above a destroyer. So when you're dealing with a vessel that's about 1.5 kilometers long and it's just a cruiser, you can kind of imagine the scale of which the Pan-Human Union builds its starships. And there are a couple of very good reasons for that. First of all, they have both access to Elerium and Alien Alloys and Mass Effect technology. Now, in universe, one of the things that I've been covering with this is the fact that they can use Mass Effect fields much in the same way that the races of the Mass Effect universe use Mass Effect fields to compress materials down to a much higher density. So if you take Alien Alloys, which in universe for XCOM and XCOM 2 is more than capable of taking most standard rounds at point blank range without even a blemish, and you compress that material again, so it's much lighter, it's much stronger, and you can use much greater quantities to both armour and reinforce your vessels, and you end up with something like this bastard. So again, I've taken the same design philosophy that I had before, with these large sweeping wings at the front, which are a pretty reminiscent nod to how starships within the Mass Effect universe are designed. You've got these big sweeping wings, you'd have the very front of the hull, granted there's a very big gun where the front of the hull would normally be, but then this section would meet up, rise, you'd have the bridge traditionally somewhere around here, and then it would just arch back down into engines, and the rest of this space on either side, where I'm gesturing with my mouse here, would be more of the same, more of these sweeping wings. But because you're dealing with a vastly different technological base, you have a larger ship that doesn't necessarily need to follow the design rules of the rest of the galaxy, and they really didn't. The Pan-Human Union went balls to the walls, because you're dealing with a culture that has been invaded and occupied and gone through 2 wars with an alien species before they even made first contact with the rest of the council races. I'm talking about the first Ethereal War during XCOM Enemy Unknown and XCOM Enemy Within, which in universe was just a test. When mankind managed to raise the Volunteer, managed to destroy the first temple ship, it was a test. We succeeded that test with flying colours, and therefore the Ethereals believed we were ready for the next stage of their plan. If we'd failed that test, we would have been just another subjugated race. But we didn't. We showed purity of form, we showed purity of mind, we showed purity of the gift, which in universe is their description of psionic powers. And as a result, the first war was at first believed a victory, then turned into a curb stomp as 7 more temple ships arrived, thoroughly wiped out every XCOM and military asset across the face of the planet, and then the Advent occupation, leading into XCOM 2 and then the second Ethereal War. So you're dealing with a race that's had its culture destroyed, had its history practically obliterated. When we first set out into the stars, we're trying to flee the Earth that, even though we've defeated the Ethereals, is such a ramshackle, blasted hellhole. The Advent races, scattered, confused, dying. The few psionic controls that were placed over the Chrysalid race, gone. They're devouring everything. We flee the Earth with however many Advent transports and UFOs that we have left behind, cannibalize alien alloys, develop new technologies to build new ones, build O'Neill-style Starship cylinder space stations, like the traditional ones that you see in a lot of frankly underplayed 1960s and 1970s sci-fi, and then we start building bastards like this. You have 12 of these cannons across 6 on each side. You've got the sweep of the armour. Underneath, what you have is a starship scaled version with a vastly lengthened kind of a barrel going on here for a mech weapon, the particle accelerator from the original XCOM Enemy Unknown, scaled up to starship scale. There are 2 of these bastards, complete with their very own firing control up at the front here, 3 shields across the front, the particle accelerators, because one of the advantages that is in canon for Mass Effect is the ability to compress superconductive materials using Mass Effect Field. Now, if you can compress superconductive materials to the point where you can fit a particle accelerator on the same scale as a mech weapon into a handheld pistol, imagine on what you can do with that technology when it's scaled up to starship scale. These things throw out energy beams that are probably in the low petatons of energy conversion. Like, that is how much energy you are throwing at your target. Now, across the sides here we have more of the missile racks. There's only 20 in comparison to the Predominance with its 24, but the Prevalence carries more ammunition, and XCOM and PHU firing tactics normally dictate firing the missiles in waves akin to an alpha strike. So the more reloads you have, the more alpha strikes you can launch. You'll also have noticed that, much akin to the Predominance, we have another underslung cargo/hangar bay, which is where these ships would actually dock with space stations through specialised arms in the space station that would meet and cover this gap entirely. So in effect, the entire cargo bay floor becomes the loading dock for loading of ship supplies and personnel for the entire vessel. I tried to describe that in one of my previous chapters. I don't know how good I was at doing so. Over here you've got a bridge which is crossed into 2 designated bridges. You probably have the main bridge and then firing control underneath. We have the same antenna, submarine kind of conning sections where you have these various subdecks and sensor arrays. You've got more weapons, you've got more of these kinetic shields which have the backup energy shields as I described before, more sensors, more satellite arrays, and what we have down here is a rare prototype system that was developed just for this cruiser with these, in terms of the Mass Effect universe, these would be Corvette sized fighters based off of the Firestorm project that would be stored and launched directly from these kind of underslung arms. In fiction it could fit 4 of these fighters altogether, but in terms of the actual model it can only fit 2. But these would drop straight out and would then be 4 independently piloted and operated Corvette sized fighters of their own. Basically think gunships on steroids. And you got the right idea. We've got more of these either mag or laser tier point defense weapons dotted around the hull, and on the back, as I described in the last video, these large round engines are a cross between EM drive and anti-gravity drive, in the inside here you've got hundreds of smaller anti-gravity pods that form a wave that is then projected out through the back of the engine, which is the only reason why these ships can move, because they're simply far too large to make use of the antimatter anti-proton system that is traditionally in Mass Effect canon. So in terms of just sheer size and utility, these things are slightly above what a Citadel Dreadnought would be sized in at. The Citadel Dreadnought would probably start about here and end at about here. They've got more weapons, but they're also not as specialised in their roles. Think of a jack of all trades. They're good at all things, but they don't excel at any one thing. They're normally deployed singly or with a one frigate escort for patrols, and otherwise the majority of these Prevalence class cruisers are kept inside PHU space, guarding planets, locking down orbital assets, and generally just looking big and nasty, because in terms of the plot there hasn't been a major space battle since the Battle for Shanxi, which would be, in history, the Second Contact War. Now, I'm glad you guys have stuck with me, hopefully, through the second one. Here we go, shrink it a little bit smaller. And, yeah, another space-related video. So, in the next one, I will fill you all in on the final the final model that I have built so far, which will be an XCOM vessel instead of a Pan-Human Union vessel, which will be the XCF Survivalist class frigate Omaha. I almost couldn't say the word then. So thank you very much for watching, ladies and gentlemen, and I'll see you all in the next one. Ta-ra for now.